My name is Bree, and I turned 32 on the day I finally broke. I still remember the weight of the words as they slipped from my mother's lips, barely audible above the restaurant chatter. You are jealous of your brother. 5 simple words that ignited the resentment I had been suppressing for years. The candles on my birthday cake flickered between us as I made a decision that would change everything. After supporting my family, especially my brother Ryan, for over a decade, I was done. Before I continue my story, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop your location in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to make a difficult choice about family boundaries. I grew up in a typical middle-class neighborhood in suburban Philadelphia. Our house was modest but comfortable, with a small backyard where Dad would grill on weekends and Mom would tend to her flower garden. Life was normal, predictable even, until my parents divorced when I was 15. Ryan was only 12 at the time, still building model airplanes and collecting baseball cards. The split wasn't particularly dramatic, just the slow deterioration of two people who had fallen out of love. But it reshaped our family dynamics in ways I couldn't have anticipated. Almost overnight, I became the reliable one, the rock, while Ryan became the baby who needed protection. Mom would say things like, "Be understanding with your brother. This is harder on him," or "Ryan needs extra attention right now." I never questioned it because that's what good older sisters do, right? They look out for their younger siblings. I got my first job at 16, working weekends at a local coffee shop. Initially, it was just to have my own spending money, but soon I was contributing to household expenses. Nothing major, just picking up groceries occasionally or buying school supplies. It felt good to help, to ease some of the burden from my mother's shoulders. College was a balancing act. While my friends were enjoying the full university experience, I was juggling classes with 2 part-time jobs. I maintained my scholarship by studying late into the night after shifts at the campus bookstore and a nearby restaurant. Meanwhile, Ryan had started his first year at community college only to drop out after 1 semester. It wasn't the right fit, Mom explained, making excuses I willingly accepted. This became a pattern. Ryan would start something, vocational school, another college program, an apprenticeship, only to abandon it within months. Each attempt was met with the same enthusiasm from my mother, each failure with the same understanding. "He just hasn't found his calling yet," she would say, as if his purpose would magically appear without any effort on his part. I stayed focused. After graduating with a degree in healthcare administration, I worked my way up from an entry-level position to becoming a medical office manager at a busy cardiology practice. The job was demanding but stable, with good benefits and decent pay. I was proud of what I had accomplished through hard work and persistence. At 27, I finally moved into my own apartment, a small 1-bedroom place that was nothing fancy but entirely mine. I thought this milestone would signal a shift in responsibilities, but instead the expectations only grew. When Ryan lost his job at an electronics store, the 3rd position he had been fired from that year, my mother called me. "He just needs a little help until he gets back on his feet," she said. "Maybe you could cover his rent for a month or 2. That temporary arrangement stretched into 3 years. Before I knew it, I was paying for his downtown apartment, much nicer than my own, at $1,800 per month. The car he couldn't afford but insisted he needed for job interviews added another $450 a month between payments and insurance. His credit cards, perpetually maxed out, required at least $300 in minimum payments. He was on my phone family plan because he couldn't deal with all that paperwork. And then there were the regular emergency cash requests ranging from $100 to $500 each time. "I just need to get through this week," he would text. Or, "There was an unexpected expense." Or, my personal favorite, "I swear this is the last time." It never was the last time. Through it all, my mother remained Ryan's biggest cheerleader. "He has such vision," she would gush during our weekly calls. "He just thinks differently than most people. That is why it is hard for him to fit into traditional jobs." What she never acknowledged was that at 29, Ryan had never held a job longer than 6 months. He had never paid his own rent on time. He had never faced a consequence for his irresponsibility because I was always there, checkbook in hand, making sure he didn't have to. And I allowed it. I convinced myself it was temporary, that eventually he would get it together, that family takes care of family. I ignored the growing resentment, the sleepless nights worrying about my own financial future, the dreams I had put on hold. I had been saving for a house for years, but the down payment fund never seemed to grow. Every time I got close to my goal, another Ryan emergency would arise. I hadn't taken a real vacation in 5 years, settling instead for the occasional weekend trip within driving distance. I worked overtime and picked up extra projects, not for advancement, but to ensure there was enough to cover both my needs and Ryan's. I had put off pursuing a master's degree that would have opened more career opportunities because I couldn't manage the tuition on top of supporting 2 households. All these sacrifices were made silently, without complaint, because that's what the responsible one does, the reliable one, the one who has it all together. At least that's what they all thought. My 32nd birthday fell on a Tuesday, so I planned a small dinner celebration for the following Saturday. Nothing extravagant, just a reservation at my favorite Italian restaurant. I had invited my mother, Ryan, and 2 close friends from work. Simple, relaxed, no fuss. Exactly how I wanted it. The morning of the dinner, Ryan texted to ask what time he needed to be there. He had forgotten about my birthday entirely until our mother reminded him. I shouldn't have been surprised, but somehow it still stung. This was the same brother who had expected a lavish gift from me on his birthday 3 months earlier, which I had dutifully provided in the form of concert tickets that cost nearly $400. As I was getting ready for dinner, my phone buzzed with another text from Ryan. "Hey sis, hate to ask, but I'm in a bit of a situation. Could you transfer $300? Promise I'll pay you back next week." I stared at the message, my finger hovering over the screen. This was my birthday, the one day that should have been about me. And here he was asking for money again. I transferred the money without replying, a familiar, hollow feeling settling in my stomach. As I applied my makeup, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. When had those fine lines appeared around my eyes? When had I started looking so tired? I thought about the life I had imagined for myself at 32, the milestones I thought I would have reached by now. I had wanted to be a homeowner by 30. The mortgage calculator on my phone showed that with what I had spent on Ryan in the past year alone, I could have made a substantial down payment on a modest house in a nice neighborhood. Instead, I lived in a rental apartment with walls I couldn't paint and a leaky faucet the landlord kept promising to fix. I had wanted to visit Europe to see the art and architecture I had only read about in books. The travel fund I had started 5 years ago had been depleted multiple times for Ryan's emergencies. The credit card points I had been saving for flights had been used to book him a last-minute trip to a music festival last summer because this band might never tour again. "Bree, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity," he had said. I had wanted to go back to school part-time to earn the credentials that would allow me to move into healthcare administration at a higher level. The brochures from the local university were still in my desk drawer, the application fee unpaid because the deadline had coincided with Ryan's card breaking down, requiring costly repairs. All these deferred dreams weighed on me as I drove to the restaurant. I tried to push them aside, to focus on celebrating another year of life, but they clung to me like shadows. I arrived to find my mother and Ryan already seated at the table. My friends had texted that they were running 15 minutes late due to traffic. Ryan was studying the menu, pointing out the most expensive entree. My mother was nodding approvingly, as if his ability to identify costly items was somehow impressive. "There she is, the birthday girl," my mother said as I approached, rising to give me a quick hug. Ryan remained seated, offering a casual wave. "Sorry I'm late," I said, though I wasn't.
I had arrived exactly at the reservation time. "No worries, we were just discussing what to order," Ryan said. "The Wagyu steak looks amazing." I nodded, knowing he expected me to pick up the check, as I always did when we dined together. I had already factored this into my monthly budget, setting aside extra to cover what would inevitably be an expensive meal. As we settled into conversation, Ryan dropped his news. "So, I have some exciting updates," he announced, as if continuing a discussion we had already been having. "I am thinking of leaving Westfield Electronics." Westfield was the computer store where he had been working for the past 4 months, his longest stretch of employment in recent memory. My heart sank. "Oh, why is that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "It's just not challenging me creatively," he said, as if selling laptops and printers should somehow be creative. "Plus, the hours are killing."
Enough. The waitress approached our table with menus and a warm smile. "I understand we're celebrating a birthday tonight?" she asked, looking at me. "Yes, it's my birthday," I confirmed, returning her smile. "Wonderful. Would you like to hear about our specials?" As she recited the evening's offerings, I noticed Ryan's eyes light up at the mention of a $50 surf and turf plate. My mother nodded encouragingly at him, then turned to me. "You should treat yourself tonight, Bree. It's not every day you turn 32. The irony of her suggesting I treat myself when I would be paying for all 3 of us wasn't lost on me. Still, I nodded politely and ordered the chicken parmesan, my usual choice, more for its reasonable price than my actual preference. Ryan predictably ordered the surf and turf along with an appetizer. My mother selected one of the more expensive pasta dishes. By the time drinks were added, I was mentally calculating a bill well over $150. My friends arrived shortly after we ordered, bringing actual gifts. Megan had bought me a lovely scarf in my favorite shade of blue, while Tara presented a gift card to the bookstore I frequented. Their thoughtfulness made the absence of anything from my family even more glaring. The conversation flowed as we ate, though I noticed how my mother continually steered it back to Ryan. When Megan asked about my recent work certification, my mother nodded briefly before interrupting. "That reminds me, Ryan, tell everyone about your new project idea." Ryan launched into an elaborate description of his plan to become a social media consultant, despite having no experience or training in the field. My friends exchanged glances but nodded politely. "It's going to require some initial investment," he explained, cutting into his steak. "Equipment, software, that kind of thing. But the potential return is huge." "Sounds like you've got it all figured out," Tara said, her tone carefully neutral. "He's always been a visionary," my mother beamed. "Even as a child, he saw things differently than others." I pushed my chicken around my plate, my appetite diminishing with each passing moment. The weight of expectations of always being the responsible one while watching Ryan receive praise for simply existing pressed down on me. As the main course dishes were cleared, the waitress returned with a small chocolate cake I had pre-ordered and paid for when making the reservation. It wasn't fancy, just a simple round cake with "Happy Birthday" written in white icing. "That looks kind of small, Ryan," commented as the cake was placed in front of me. "It's perfect," I said firmly, unwilling to let him dampen this small pleasure I had arranged for myself. "You could have gone for something more exciting," my mother chimed in. "Remember those elaborate theme cakes we used to get Ryan for his birthdays?" I did remember. I remembered because I had paid for the last 3 of them, each costing over $100 from a specialty bakery. My own birthdays had always been more modest affairs. "I like chocolate cake," I said simply, forcing a smile as the waitress lit the candles. As the small flames flickered, casting a warm glow over the table, my mother leaned in closer. Her voice dropped to a whisper, but her words were crystal clear. "You're jealous of your brother's potential. You always have been." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. Jealous of Ryan? The brother who at 29 had never supported himself? The brother whose rent I paid, whose car I financed, whose emergencies constantly drained my savings?
Something inside me snapped. Years of resentment, of swallowed protests, of deferred dreams all converged in that moment. "Then let him pay his own bills," I said, my voice quiet but firm. My mother drew back, surprised by my response. "What did you say?" "I said," I repeated, louder this time, "if Ryan has so much potential, then let him pay his own bills." A heavy silence fell over the table. My friends shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension. Ryan let out a forced laugh. "Someone's grumpy on her birthday," he said, attempting to diffuse the situation. My mother joined in with a nervous chuckle. "Birthdays can make us all a little emotional. Now make a wish and blow out your candles before the wax drips all over your cake." I looked at the flickering candles, then at my brother and my mother. In that moment, I made my wish. Not for the things I'd always wanted, but for something more fundamental. The courage to change what I could no longer accept. I blew out the candles in one decisive breath. "We should talk about my investment in your new business venture," my mother said to Ryan, clearly eager to move past the awkward moment. "Actually," Ryan interjected, turning to me, "I was hoping Bree might want to get in on the ground floor. It could be really profitable for her." I stared at him incredulously. After everything, after the thousands of dollars I had already given him, with nothing to show for it, he was asking for more? "What do you think, Bree?" my mother prompted. "It would be nice to support your brother's dreams for once." For once? The absurdity of her statement was the final straw. I reached for my purse, pulled out enough cash to cover my portion of the meal plus a generous tip, and placed it on the table. "Thank you for coming to my birthday dinner," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the emotions churning inside me. "I need to go now." "But we haven't had cake yet," my mother protested. "You can split my piece," I replied, standing up. I nodded to my friends who looked concerned but understanding. "I'll call you both tomorrow." With that, I walked out of the restaurant, ignoring my mother's calls behind me. For the first time in years, I had put myself first. And though my hands were shaking as I got into my car, I also felt an unexpected sense of relief. The dam had broken. There was no going back now. The drive home was a blur. Tears streamed down my face as years of suppressed emotions finally found release. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, my sadness had crystallized into something else: determination. I kicked off my heels at the door and went straight to my desk. Opening my laptop, I began creating a spreadsheet. Every bill, every loan, every financial obligation I had taken on for Ryan. I dug through bank statements, credit card bills, Venmo transfers, every record I could find. As the numbers added up, my breath caught. In the past year alone, I had spent $36,400 on my brother. $36,400. The figure seemed impossible. Yet there it was in black and white. There was enough for a down payment on a modest home in the Philadelphia suburbs. It was enough for a master's degree. It was enough for the European vacation I had dreamed of since college. Instead, it had vanished into the black hole of Ryan's irresponsibility. No more, I decided. Not another dollar. I opened a new document and began listing every financial connection between us. 1. Rent payment for downtown apartment, $1,800. Month 2. Car payment, $320. Month 3. Car insurance, $130. Month 4. Credit card minimum payments, $300. Month 5. Phone bill on my family plan, $95. Month 6. Streaming services subscriptions, $45. Month 7. Gym membership, $65. Month 8. Utility bills I often covered, $150, $120. Month 9. Regular cash loans, varying amounts. Next to each item, I noted what needed to be done to disentangle myself. For some, it would be as simple as removing my payment information. For others, like the apartment where I was the guarantor, it would require more formal notifications. I worked through the night, the glow of my laptop screen illuminating my determination. With each account I accessed, each payment I canceled, I felt a strange mixture of guilt and liberation. First, I called the apartment management company. Though it was after hours, I left a detailed voicemail explaining that I would no longer be serving as a guarantor for Ryan's lease. I followed up with an email stating the same, making it clear that I would fulfill my obligation through the end of the current month, but not beyond. Next came the credit cards. I removed my automatic payments from the 3 cards I had been paying minimums on. I took screenshots of the final payments processing, documenting that I had not left any outstanding balances as of that date. The car payment was trickier. My name was on the loan alongside Ryan's, a mistake I had made when he insisted he needed reliable transportation for job interviews. I couldn't simply remove myself, but I could stop making payments. I sent a formal letter to the finance company explaining that I would no longer be contributing to the loan, with a copy to Ryan. I removed him from my family plan effective at the end of the current billing period. I canceled the auto payments for his car insurance, streaming services, and gym membership. Our one joint checking account, which I had opened to make it easier to transfer money to him, was closed. I transferred the remaining balance, less than $100, to my personal account. By 3 in the morning, I had methodically severed every financial tie I could. My next step was composing an email to both Ryan and my mother. I wrote and rewrote it several times, trying to find the right balance between firmness and compassion. The final version was simple and direct. Ryan and Mom, as of today, I am no longer able to provide financial support for Ryan's expenses. I have canceled all automatic payments and removed my payment information from all accounts. I have fulfilled all obligations through the end of this month, which provides 30 days of notice for alternative arrangements to be made. This decision is not up for discussion or negotiation. It is final. Bree.
First came the guilt trips. How could you do this to your brother? After everything we've been through as a family, I never raised you to be this heartless. When those didn't work, she escalated to involving other family members. My aunt called to tell me how disappointed she was in my cruel behavior. My cousin sent a long text about how family should always come first. Even my father, who had been minimally involved in our lives since the divorce, reached out to understand what was going on. The most difficult moment came when Ryan showed up at my workplace. I was in the middle of a staff meeting when the receptionist interrupted to tell me my brother was in the waiting room, refusing to leave until he spoke with me. I excused myself, my heart pounding as I walked to the reception area. Ryan looked disheveled, his eyes red from what I assumed was either lack of sleep or crying. "You need to leave," I said quietly, aware of the patients in the waiting room and my colleagues just down the hall. "Not until you fix this," he insisted, his voice too loud for the professional setting. "They're going to evict me, Bree. Is that what you want, for your brother to be homeless?" "We can talk about this later, but not here," I replied, maintaining my composure despite the scene he was creating. "This is my workplace." "You don't get to decide when we talk about this," he shouted, causing several patients to look up in alarm. The office manager appeared beside me, her expression concerned. "Is everything all right, Bree? Do we need to call security?" The threat of security finally got through to Ryan. He left, but not before delivering a parting shot loud enough for everyone to hear. "Hope you're happy with yourself. Mom was right. You've always been jealous of me." I returned to my meeting, my face burning with embarrassment, but I held my head high. My colleagues were kind enough not to mention the incident, though I knew it would be the subject of office gossip for days to come. That evening, my mother called. I had been screening her calls for days, but decided it was time to face her directly. "Ryan told me what happened in your office," she began without preamble. "This has gone far enough, Bree. You've made your point." "This isn't about making a point," I replied. "It's about setting healthy boundaries." "Boundaries?" she scoffed. "Is that what your therapist calls abandoning your family? Because that's what you're doing." I hadn't mentioned seeing a therapist, though I had been considering it. The fact that she jumped to that conclusion told me she knew on some level that the situation had been problematic. "I'm not abandoning anyone," I said calmly. "I'm simply saying that at 29, Ryan needs to be responsible for his own expenses."
He's going through a difficult time right now, she argued. You know how sensitive he is. He's been going through a difficult time for years, Mom, and I've been supporting him through all of them. It's time for that to change. So what happens when he gets evicted? When his car gets repossessed? Where's he supposed to go? That's for Ryan to figure out, I said, though the words were harder to say than I had expected. He's an adult. Well, I can't take him in, she declared. My house isn't big enough. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Her 3-bedroom house wasn't big enough for one additional person, yet my 1-bedroom apartment somehow had been the assumed backup plan all along. That's between you and Ryan, I replied. I'm no longer involved in solving his housing situation. The conversation ended with my mother threatening to disown me if I didn't resume the payments. It was a dramatic declaration, especially considering she had never owned much to begin with. Still, the words stung, revealing just how conditional her love had always been. 2 weeks after my birthday dinner that had triggered such monumental change, I received notice that Ryan's apartment complex had begun eviction proceedings. He had made no rent payment for the current month. The management company contacted me as the guarantor, but I referred them to my email, withdrawing from that role. They would be legal implications to sort out, but I was prepared to face them. Around the same time, Ryan's car was repossessed. He called me in tears from a bus stop, describing how the tow truck had come in the middle of the night. I listened sympathetically, but remained firm in my position. I'm sorry you're going through this, Ryan, but you had the car for 3 years. You knew the payments were your responsibility. How am I supposed to get to job interviews without a car? He demanded. The same way thousands of people in Philadelphia do every day. Public transportation. The family drama reached its peak at Sunday dinner at my aunt's house. I had almost declined the invitation, sensing it was a setup, but decided feasting everyone at once might be easier than the constant individual ambushes. I was right about it being a setup. The entire extended family was there, and it quickly became clear that the meal was actually an intervention designed to make me see reason. My aunt spoke first. We're all very concerned about the situation with Ryan, Bree. We know you've always been the responsible one, but this seems extreme. My uncle nodded in agreement. Family helps family. That's just how it works. One by one, they weighed in, echoing the same sentiments my mother had been bombarding me with for weeks. I listened politely, waiting for them to finish. When the table finally fell silent, all eyes on me, I reached into my bag and pulled out my spreadsheet. I appreciate your concern, I began, but I'd like to share some context. I passed copies of the document around the table. This is a record of the financial support I've provided to Ryan over the past year. $36,400. That's more than half my annual salary after taxes. The silence that followed was deafening. My relatives studied the numbers, their expressions shifting from righteous indignation to shock. This can't be right, my aunt finally said, though her tone lacked conviction. Every entry is documented, I assured her. Bank transfers, payment receipts, everything. My cousin, who had been particularly vocal about my selfishness, let out a low whistle. 36,000. Seriously, Ryan? Ryan, who had been uncharacteristically quiet throughout the intervention, stared at his plate. I was going to pay her back, he mumbled. When? I asked, not unkindly. In all these years, you've never repaid a single loan. He had no answer for that. The truth is, I continued, addressing the whole table, I've been enabling behavior that isn't healthy for Ryan or for me. He's never had to learn basic adult responsibilities because I've always been there to pick up the slack. Ryan finally looked up. It's not like I don't want to be responsible, he said defensively. I just never learned how to manage all that stuff. Because I never let you, I acknowledged, and that's on me. But it can't continue. For the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine understanding in my family's eyes. Not complete agreement, perhaps, but at least recognition that the situation was more complex than they had assumed. As we prepared to leave, my aunt pulled me aside. I had no idea with this much, she admitted. Why didn't you say something sooner? Because I was taught that talking about money is inappropriate. Because I was taught that family doesn't keep score. Because I was taught that being the responsible one meant shouldering everyone else's burdens without complaint. She nodded slowly. I'm sorry, Bree. We should have seen what was happening. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a start. As I drove home that night, I felt the first stirrings of hope that just maybe, this painful process would lead to positive change for everyone involved. 2 months after the birthday dinner that had triggered such monumental change, I met Ryan for coffee at a small cafe midway between our homes. His new home, I should say. A studio apartment in a much less trendy neighborhood than his previous place. It wasn't what anyone would call luxurious, but it was clean, safe, and most importantly, within his budget. The water pressure kind of sucks, he admitted, stirring his coffee absently. And the neighbors can be loud on weekends, but it's okay. It works. I nodded, noting the changes in his appearance. His designer clothes had been replaced by more modest attire. His hair was longer, no longer maintained by expensive monthly cuts. But there was something else different about him, too. Something less tangible, but more significant. I started a new job, he said, almost shyly. It's entry-level customer service at that software company downtown. Nothing exciting, but the benefits are decent, and there's room to move up if I stick with it. That's great, Ryan, I said, genuinely pleased. How do you like it so far? It's a job, he shrugged, then offered a small smile. But my supervisor said I'm picking things up quickly, and I haven't been late once, which is apparently a big deal to them. It was such a simple accomplishment, showing up on time. Yet I could see the pride in his eyes. For someone who had never had to be accountable before, it represented a significant shift. In figuring out this budgeting thing, too, he continued, did you know there are apps that track your spending? Seems obvious now, but it's actually helping. We talked for nearly an hour, the conversation easier than it had been in years. There were awkward moments, certainly, and unspoken tensions that would take time to resolve, but it was a beginning. As we were preparing to leave, he hesitated, then spoke in a rush. I'm sorry, Bree, for everything. I never really thought about what all those emergencies cost you. Not just the money, but the stress, the extra hours you worked, the things you gave up. The apology was unexpected and imperfect, but sincere. I felt something loosen in my chest, a knot of resentment beginning to unwind. Thank you for saying that, I replied. It means a lot. Our mother was taking longer to adjust to the new normal. She had maintained a chilly distance since the family dinner, calling occasionally but keeping conversations brief and formal. When we did speak, she would